Rose Whitmore stared out of the train window as the Cornish coastline slowly came into view. It had been years since she last visited Penzance, where her mother now lived in a nursing home. With her daughter Daisy sitting quietly beside her, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers, Rose felt a strange mix of hope and anxiety. The past was a fragile thing, full of memories both bitter and sweet. Rose had left Cornwall long ago, trying to escape the shadows of her family's fractured history. But now, after the death of her husband, she wanted to heal old wounds, not just for herself, but for Daisy. "Are you excited, Mum?" Daisy asked, her bright eyes shining with innocence. Rose smiled softly. "I am, love. It will be good to see Nanny again." Daisy held up the flowers proudly. "I made this for her. It's a special gift for Mother's Day." As the train pulled into the quiet station, Rose's heart pounded. The nursing home was just a short walk away, nestled among the rolling hills of Cornwall. She wondered if her mother would remember her, or if dementia had taken more than just memories. When they arrived, a frail woman sat by the window. Edna Whitmore looked out with a distant gaze, her hands trembling slightly. Rose approached slowly, her voice gentle. "Nanny, it's me. Rose." Edna's eyes flickered briefly, then closed again. Rose's throat tightened. Would this reunion bring comfort or heartbreak? Daisy stepped forward, holding out her bouquet. "These are for you, Nanny. Mum said you liked poppies." For a moment, Edna's fingers twitched. A flicker of recognition passed across her face. The flowers seemed to stir something deep inside her. Rose watched silently as the old woman's eyes opened wider. This small moment felt like a fragile bridge between past and present. Outside, the wind whispered through the Cornish cliffs. The day was far from over. The quiet room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Rose sat beside her mother's chair, feeling the weight of years between them. Edna's gaze wandered aimlessly, sometimes focusing on Daisy's bouquet, other times lost in a distant memory. Rose wondered how many moments like this had slipped away, unspoken and unnoticed. "Do you remember the garden, Nanny?" Rose asked softly. Edna blinked, then nodded slowly. "Roses, and the old oak tree." Daisy smiled, curious. "Tell me about it, Nanny." A faint smile touched Edna's lips. "Your mother used to run beneath that tree, full of laughter and dreams." Rose's throat tightened. Memories flooded back, childhood days in Cornwall, sunlit afternoons, and promises made long ago. Suddenly, Edna's hand reached out, trembling, and grasped Rose's fingers tightly. "You must forgive me," she whispered, voice fragile. "For all I have forgotten." Tears welled in Rose's eyes. The past was not just lost, it was buried deep beneath the layers of illness and time. Daisy squeezed her mother's hand. "It's okay, Nanny. We're here now." Just then the door creaked open. A nurse appeared, her eyes kind yet cautious. "Mrs. Whitmore, you have a visitor," she said quietly. Rose's heart skipped a beat. A visitor? Who could it be at this hour? The nurse smiled gently. "Come and see for yourself." Rose stood, curiosity mingled with a sudden hope. Whatever the past held, today might be the day for new beginnings. Rose followed the nurse down a narrow corridor. The walls were lined with faded photographs and old paintings, each telling stories of lives long gone. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this visitor? Why now? The nurse stopped outside a small sitting room. "Please wait here," she said kindly and stepped inside. Rose's heart pounded as the door opened again. A woman entered, her uniform crisp and neat. She carried herself with quiet confidence, yet her eyes held a warmth that immediately put Rose at ease. "Rose Whitmore?" the woman asked gently. "Yes, that's me," Rose replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Green. I served with your husband in the British Army," the woman said softly. "He spoke of you often. You were his strength." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. She had thought of her late husband every day since his passing, but hearing his name spoken by someone who knew him well brought a strange comfort. Sarah smiled. "I'm here because he wanted me to find you. He left something for you." Rose's hands trembled as Sarah handed her a small worn box. The weight of it felt heavier than she expected. "What is this?" Rose whispered. Sarah looked at her with kindness. "Open it when you're ready. It holds memories he wanted you to have." Rose nodded slowly, clutching the box close. For the first time since she arrived, hope flickered inside her. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The past and present were about to collide in ways she never imagined. Back in her small flat, Rose sat at the kitchen table, the worn box resting in front of her. Her fingers trembled as she slowly lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of old letters, photographs, and a delicate silver locket. Each letter was written in her husband's neat handwriting, filled with words of love, hope, and apology. One letter caught her eye. It was addressed to her, but never sent. "My dearest Rose," it began. "There are things I must tell you, things I was afraid to share while I was alive." Rose's breath caught. What secrets had he kept? Why had he hidden them from her? She opened the locket and found a tiny photograph of a young boy. Rose's heart ached with confusion and curiosity. "Who is this?" she whispered. A sudden knock at the door startled her. It was Sarah again, standing patiently with a gentle smile. "There's more you need to know," Sarah said softly. "Your husband's past is not as simple as it seemed." Rose felt a shiver run down her spine. The box was only the beginning. The truth was waiting, but would she be ready to face it? The days that followed blurred into one another. Rose moved through them like a ghost in her own life, her thoughts haunted by the image of the boy inside the locket. His eyes reminded her so painfully of her late husband's. It was as though he were staring back at her from another lifetime. She had to know who he was. She returned to the care home the next morning, clutching the box to her chest. The cold wind bit at her face as she stepped onto the gravel drive, the house looming against the gray sky like a secret refusing to stay buried. Sarah was waiting inside, her expression calm but watchful. "You came back," Sarah said gently, offering a cup of tea. Rose didn't waste time. "Tell me everything." They sat by the fireplace, the only source of warmth in the drawing room. Sarah took a deep breath and began. "Your husband and I were stationed in Cyprus," she said. "There was a boy. His name was Elias. He was the son of a local interpreter who worked closely with our unit. During a raid, his family was caught in the crossfire. Elias survived. Your husband tried everything to get him to safety. When we were pulled out, he couldn't bring Elias with him. He fought the system, Rose. He tried for months. Paperwork, requests, appeals. All denied." Rose sat frozen. "And the photograph in the locket?" "He carried it with him always," Sarah replied. "He said it reminded him of something he couldn't fix, a promise he failed to keep. When he knew he was dying, he asked me to find Elias. And to find you." Tears rolled silently down Rose's cheeks. "So the boy, he's alive?" Sarah nodded. "We think so. He was moved to a shelter near Thessaloniki. After that, records became murky. But I'm here to help. I've been looking for him. Your husband wanted Elias to be part of your life. Not out of guilt, but out of love." A silence stretched between them, heavy with everything that had been unsaid. Rose reached into the box and pulled out the final letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "My beloved Rose," the letter began, "I've kept this from you not because I didn't trust you, but because I was ashamed. I failed that boy. And it tore at me every day. But I always believed you were the one who could make it right." She read the words over and over, the ink smudged with tears. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. The past had reached out to her, not to haunt her, but to guide her. "Help me find him," Rose whispered. "Help me find Elias." Sarah's eyes glistened. "We'll start tonight. I have someone you need to meet." Outside, the wind had stilled. But inside, Rose's heart began to race with purpose for the first time in years. The road ahead would not be easy. But this time, she would not walk it alone. The meeting took place in a quiet tea room near the edge of town. Rose had never been there before. The lace curtains, the ticking of an old wall clock, and the faint scent of lavender created an air of calm that sharply contrasted with the storm inside her. Sarah arrived first, sitting at a table by the window. With her was a man in his 60s, olive skin weathered by sun and years of travel. He rose when Rose entered, his eyes assessing her not with suspicion, but a kind of tired knowing. "Rose," Sarah said, standing. "This is Nikos Demas. He runs a charity that traces war-displaced children. If anyone can find Elias, it's him." Nikos extended his hand. I've waited a long time to meet you. Rose shook his hand, firm but trembling. Did you know my husband? No, Nikos replied, his voice gravelly with a Greek accent softened by years in Britain. But I know what he did. The story of Elias was passed to me through others. Soldiers. Doctors. Aid workers. He mattered to your husband, enough to move mountains. He pulled out a battered file, its corners frayed, the pages inside smudged with thumbprints and faded ink. We've tracked Elias to a shelter outside Thessaloniki. He was taken in by volunteers, then moved after funding was cut. After that, nothing for years. But last month, someone matching his age and description appeared on a security report in Dover. Rose sat up. Here? In the UK. Nikos nodded. He was detained for trespassing near the docks. No ID. He gave no name. Spoke little. But the guard noted something strange. He handed Rose a photograph. It was grainy, taken from a distance. But the boy, no young man, was unmistakable. Dark hair, lean frame, and eyes that carried a quiet storm. Around his neck hung something glinting. Her breath caught. The locket, she whispered. Sarah leaned closer. Are you sure? Rose nodded. I would know it anywhere. Nikos tapped the photo. We believe it's Elias. He was released the next morning. Vanished again. But we have a trail. He's here. Somewhere. Hope and fear surged in equal measure. Rose looked down at her hands. If he doesn't want to be found? Then you offer him what your husband never could, Nikos said gently. A choice. That night, Rose couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small cottage, the photo clutched tightly in her hand. The image of Elias lingered behind her eyes, a ghost not of pain, but of promise. She rose before dawn, dressed in silence, and returned to the drawer where her husband's letters were kept. There, tucked beneath the final envelope, was something she hadn't noticed before. A receipt, barely legible, dated a few weeks before his death. It was for a transfer, anonymous, to a private youth housing agency in Dover. Her heart pounded. She picked up her phone and rang Sarah. We've got more than a trail now, she said, breathless. We've got a destination. By midday, they were on the road, the skies heavy with rain, the wind curling through the trees like whispers. Rose clutched the photo in her lap, watching the miles vanish under the tires. She didn't speak much. Her thoughts were already ahead of her, imagining what she would say if she saw him, if he let her. As they pulled into Dover, the coastline appeared like a scar carved into the land, wild and indifferent. But Rose no longer felt small in front of it. She had come too far to turn back. The rain had stopped by the time they reached the outskirts of Dover. Gray clouds still loomed above, casting shadows across the narrow roads and brick facades. Nikos had sent them the address of the youth shelter, now repurposed as temporary housing for displaced minors. It stood at the end of a quiet lane, hidden behind ivy-covered gates. Rose's breath fogged the car window as she stared at the building. It looked ordinary. Plain red brick. Rusted railings. An old sign that read Harbor Haven. But she felt a charge in the air, like something was watching, waiting. Sarah put a hand on her arm. You're shaking. Rose hadn't noticed. Her fingers were clenched around the photograph of Elias. They entered through a side gate, passing a communal garden overgrown with weeds and faded footballs. A volunteer greeted them, a young woman in a green fleece who introduced herself as Megan. Most of the lads don't stay long, she said, leading them inside. They come and go. But one, well, he's different. Keeps to himself. Doesn't speak much. Draws a lot. Draws? Rose asked. Megan nodded. Always sketching. Walls, notebooks, the backs of cereal boxes. But never people. Until a few days ago. She led them down a corridor that smelled of damp and old paint, then stopped before a door slightly ajar. Megan knocked gently. Jamie? Got some visitors. No response. Megan opened the door slowly. Inside, the room was small, with a bed against one wall and drawings covering nearly every surface. Charcoal sketches of boats, shorelines, distant cities. But Rose's eyes locked on one drawing in particular, taped to the window pane. It was a portrait. A woman with soft eyes and long curls, seated at a piano. A little boy beside her, holding her hand. Rose gasped. "That's me." Sarah stepped forward. "Are you sure?" Rose nodded. "That was our flat in Manchester. I played piano every evening. Elias sat next to me like that, even when he was barely old enough to reach the keys." A sound shifted in the corner. Someone moved. From behind the tall bookshelf, a boy. No, a young man emerged. Thin, eyes dark as storm clouds. He stared at them, lips parted slightly, one hand curled protectively around a pendant. "The locket." Rose took a step forward. "Elias." He flinched. "I'm not here to make you remember things you don't want to," she said gently. "But I've been looking for you. For years." He said nothing. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter. The one left by her husband. Slowly, she placed it on the desk. "This was written by the man who risked everything for you." His eyes darted to the envelope. Slowly, he stepped forward, fingers trembling as he picked it up. His thumb traced the familiar handwriting. Then, his voice, low and rough. "He called me Starlight." Rose smiled, tears spilling freely. "He said you used to count stars when you couldn't sleep." "I still do," Elias whispered. Silence fell between them, heavy but not unwelcome. Sarah turned away, discreetly brushing her eyes. Megan spoke quietly. "You can take your time. He hasn't spoken to anyone until now." Rose looked at Elias. "Would it be all right if we talked for a while?" He nodded. She sat on the floor, crossing her legs like she used to when telling bedtime stories. Elias joined her, carefully, like someone learning to be still. He opened the letter, unfolding the words he'd never seen before. As he read, his face changed, softened. Confusion gave way to grief. Then something brighter. Recognition. "I thought he left me," Elias said. "Everyone always does." "Not him," Rose replied. "He wanted to protect you. And he never stopped loving you." "I never stopped either." For the first time, Elias looked into her eyes. Really looked. Then almost a whisper. "Are you staying?" Rose reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from his brow. "For as long as you'll have me." Outside, the clouds broke apart. A shaft of sunlight spilled through the window, lighting up the portrait taped to the glass. It had been 3 days since Elias first spoke. In that short time, Rose and Sarah had rearranged their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. They extended their stay in Dover, converting a quiet inn into a temporary home. Megan helped them arrange counseling support, while Elias began attending daily art therapy sessions. Though he was still guarded, something had shifted. The drawings on his wall began to change. No longer distant coastlines or faceless figures. Now he sketched people. Smiles. Sunlight through windows. And in almost every image, a child, Jamie, his half-sister, appeared. Always watching. Always waiting. It was Jamie who had written another letter, this time with her own tiny hands. "Mom, please come back soon. I want to show him the painting I made. The one with the stars." Rose had cried when she read it. She hadn't told Jamie what had happened. Not really. Only that she had found someone very special who needed her. And now, Elias was ready. He stood beside her as they packed the car. His bag was light, just a few clothes, a sketchpad, the locket. But his shoulders were straighter, his voice firmer. "I want to meet her," he said. "Jamie." "She wants to meet you too," Rose replied. They returned to Cheshire quietly. The fields were beginning to bloom again, daffodils swaying along hedgerows as spring crept forward. Rose's hands trembled on the steering wheel, not with fear, but anticipation. When they pulled into the driveway, Jamie was already at the window, her face pressed against the glass. Her little hands waved frantically. Rose barely got out of the car before Jamie sprinted toward her, hugging her legs tightly. "Mom, you're back." Then she saw Elias. Jamie blinked, head tilting, curious. Elias knelt down slowly, meeting her at eye level. He looked nervous, like a deer in headlights. Jamie stepped forward and touched the pendant around his neck. "That's shiny," she said. "Are you the boy in my painting?" Elias didn't know how to respond. He looked to Rose for help, but she said nothing, only smiled. Jamie reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is for you." Elias opened it. Crayons. Stars. A boy with black hair. A girl in yellow. Two hands held together beneath the night sky. "It's us," Jamie said proudly. "Mum says stars never really go away. They're just hiding." Elias blinked hard. He looked up at Rose, then back at Jamie. His lips trembled. "Thank you." Jamie grinned. "Want to see my room? I have paints. And snacks. But no boys are allowed to touch Mr. Cuddles." Elias laughed. An honest, real laugh. It echoed across the garden like a song long forgotten. Rose stood back, hands over her mouth, overcome. Sarah came out from the kitchen, drying her hands. "Well, I'll be damned," she said quietly. That evening, they had dinner together. Real dinner. Elias helped Jamie cut her sausages. Sarah poured wine. They passed the bread without argument. It was the kind of evening Rose used to dream about, one she thought had died with the letter her husband left behind. But as the sun set, something tugged at her heart. She rose from the table and fetched the shoebox from the attic. The same one her aunt had kept hidden, filled with documents, photographs, and a single sealed envelope addressed to her. She had never opened it. Not until now. With shaking fingers, she tore the seal. Inside was a letter written in her aunt's familiar hand. "Dearest Rose. If you are reading this, it means the truth has surfaced. You may hate me for what I did, but everything I kept from you, I did out of fear and shame. I couldn't face the past. I couldn't look at that child and not see my mistakes. But you have a gift. A heart big enough to forgive, to love without limit." Elias needed more than just shelter. He needed someone who saw the light in him. Someone who remembered. "And so I made a choice. I left what I could for him, not just in the form of a trust or a deed, but in your hands. Because you were always the one. Even when I didn't say it. Even when I let my bitterness speak instead of my heart. He was always meant for you. Forgive me. Love. Margaret." Rose folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest. In that moment, every ache she had carried, the confusion, the anger, the years of silence, fell away like rain off a roof. She returned to the kitchen, where Jamie and Elias were playing a clumsy duet on her old keyboard, giggling as wrong notes chimed like wind chimes. Sarah watched her and raised a brow. "What was in the letter?" Rose smiled, eyes damp. "A gift," she said. "That was meant for me all along."